Amara was a young maid who worked in the great mansion of Chief Obinna, one of the richest men in the city. The mansion was wide and filled with marble floors, shiny chandeliers, and servants who moved about with quiet steps. But despite all the beauty of the house, Amara's life was not easy. She was poor and had been brought to the mansion by her uncle, who begged the chief to give her work. She cleaned the floors, washed clothes, scrubbed the kitchen, and sometimes stayed up late into the night to finish her duties. Even though she worked from dawn until dusk, she never complained. She told herself that patience would one day bring her peace. Chief Obinna was a man who was admired by many. He had built businesses across the land and people spoke of his success. He was known for his generosity outside the home, giving to the poor and helping those in need. But inside the house, there was a quiet tension that not everyone noticed. His wife, Madame Adiz, was beautiful and elegant, always dressed in the finest clothes. She walked with pride, her head high, as though the world itself belonged to her. But beneath her beauty was a heart filled with secrets, and Amara was the first to sense something was not right. Amara noticed it in the small things. Each time Madame Adiz entered the kitchen, the other maids were asked to leave. Adiz would prepare a special dish for her husband, and she always refused to let anyone else taste it. If a servant tried to sample the food, even for salt, she would become angry. At first, Amara thought nothing of it. Perhaps the madam simply wanted to show her love for her husband by cooking for him personally. But as days turned into weeks, Amara's uneasiness grew stronger. She would watch as Chief Obinna smiled, trusting his wife, and ate whatever she placed before him. And each time, Amara's heart would beat faster with fear. One afternoon, while cleaning the kitchen shelves, Amara found a small bottle hidden behind the spice jars. It contained a white powder. She did not know what it was, but she had never seen it used for cooking. The sight of it made her hand tremble. Quickly she placed it back where she found it, but from that day her worry grew heavier. She began to watch closely whenever Madame Adiz cooked. Sometimes she noticed the madam pouring something into the pot after everyone had left the kitchen. Amara was torn between silence and courage. She was just a poor maid. If she spoke wrongly, she could be thrown out of the house with nothing. Yet, if her fear was true, Chief Obinna's life could be in danger. At night, as she lay on her small mat in the servants' quarters, she prayed for guidance. Her heart was restless and sleep escaped her. She thought of her own father who had died when she was young, and she remembered her mother's words, "Speak the truth even if your voice shakes." Those words gave her strength. One evening, Chief Obinna returned home tired from a long day. He sat in the grand dining hall, where the golden lights of the chandelier reflected on the polished table. Madame Adiz entered gracefully, holding a covered dish. She placed it in front of him with a smile that did not quite reach her eyes. Amara stood nearby, holding a jug of water, her hands trembling slightly. As the chief prepared to eat, her fear boiled over. She could no longer keep quiet. She bent down quickly and whispered, her voice shaking but urgent. "Sir, please, do not eat the food your wife gives you." Chief Obinna froze. His spoon stopped in midair and he turned slowly to look at her. His brows furrowed in confusion and for a moment, silence filled the hall. Madame Adiz looked up sharply, her eyes narrowing. "What did you say?" she demanded, her tone sharp as a knife. Amara's heart raced. She wanted to take back her words, to hide in shame, but it was too late. She had spoken. Obinna dismissed the other servants with a wave of his hand, but he kept his eyes fixed on Amara. His voice was calm but heavy. "Amara, repeat what you said." Her lips trembled, but she forced herself to speak. "Sir, forgive me. But I have seen things in the kitchen. Madam, she never lets anyone taste your food. I have seen her pour something into the pot when no one is looking. And today, I found a bottle of white powder. Please, sir, do not eat." Her knees shook and she felt tears sting her eyes. Adiz stood, her face red with fury. "Lies?" she shouted. "This girl is jealous. She wants to destroy our marriage. How dare a common maid accuse me in my own home?" Her voice echoed through the dining hall. Obinna raised his hand for silence. His face showed no anger, only deep thought. He studied Amara for a long moment. The maid stood trembling, her head bowed, yet there was honesty in her eyes. She had nothing to gain by lying. Slowly, Obinna pushed the plate of food away and stood from the table. "Enough for tonight," he said quietly. Then he left the hall, his mind heavy with questions. Amara remained frozen in place, her heart pounding. She knew she had crossed a dangerous line. If Madame Adiz's anger grew, she could lose her job or worse. But deep in her soul, she felt a strange peace. She had spoken the truth, and that truth might one day save a life. That night, in her small corner, Amara prayed again. She asked for courage to face whatever would come. And though fear sat heavy in her chest, she whispered to herself, "I have done the right thing." Little did she know, the words she had spoken would change everything in Chief Obinna's household forever. Chief Obinna sat alone in his private study that night, his mind restless. The words of the poor maid replayed in his head over and over, "Sir, please, do not eat the food your wife gives you." He almost laughed when she first said it. How could Adiz, the woman he had married and trusted for years, harm him? It sounded too wild, too impossible. Yet, the look in Amara's eyes had been different. It was not the look of a liar. It was the look of someone who carried both fear and courage. Obinna poured himself a glass of water and walked slowly around the room. His heart beat harder as memories came rushing back. He remembered how, in recent months, he had been falling ill after certain meals, strange headaches, weakness, stomach pains. Doctors told him it was stress, that he worked too hard. He believed them, never thinking of questioning the food he ate. Now, Amara's trembling voice had opened a small door of doubt in his mind, and he could not close it. At dinner that night, Adiz entered the dining room as gracefully as always, carrying a covered dish. She smiled sweetly at him, her golden earrings glittering under the chandelier. "My husband," she said warmly, "I made your favorite soup tonight. You will enjoy it." Obinna forced a smile, hiding the storm inside him. He sat at the long dining table, watching her carefully. She placed the steaming plate in front of him and sat down with her own meal. Slowly he lifted his spoon, his hand steady though his heart raced. He dipped into the soup, brought it to his lips, and then paused. Adiz's eyes followed him with interest, almost too closely. Obinna lowered the spoon again, pretending to take another scoop. This time, he tilted his head slightly and raised the spoon halfway before setting it down gently on the table. "Delicious," he said with a calm voice, pretending to swallow. Adiz's lips curved into a satisfied smile. She nodded, pleased, and began to eat her own portion. Later, when she left the room, Obinna called Amara secretly. The maid entered the study, her eyes filled with fear. She thought perhaps she had already been punished for speaking too boldly earlier. But instead, Obinna gestured for her to sit. "Amara," he said in a quiet, serious tone, "you warned me not to eat my wife's food. Tell me why." Her hands trembled and tears filled her eyes as she bent her head. "Sir, forgive me. I'm only a maid. I should not speak against madam. But I cannot keep quiet when danger is near. I saw her, with my own eyes, pouring a strange powder into the soup one evening when no one was in the kitchen. I did not know what it was, but my heart told me it was not safe. Since then, I have prayed every day for courage to warn you." Obinna stared at her, stunned. Her voice was soft, but every word carried pain and honesty. He rubbed his chin slowly, thinking hard. For a moment he wanted to dismiss it. Perhaps it was just a misunderstanding. Perhaps Adiz had only been adding a spice. But deep in his heart, doubt had already taken root. "Did you ever taste the food?" he asked firmly. Amara shook her head quickly. "No, sir. Madam never allowed me. She always told us to leave when she cooked for you. That is why I became afraid. I may be poor, sir, but I know when something is wrong. Please forgive me if I am wrong, but my conscience could not let me stay silent." Obinna leaned back in his chair. He could hear the honesty in her tone. This was no game. Amara was risking her job, her safety, even her life by speaking against Madame Adiz. A poor maid like her had nothing to gain and everything to lose. For the first time in years, Obinna felt a shiver of fear in his own home. He remembered the times Adiz had smiled too quickly when urging him to eat. He remembered how she often insisted on serving him herself, never allowing any other maid to touch the plates. The puzzle pieces began to join together, and the picture they painted was troubling. Amara's tears slid down her cheeks, but she lifted her eyes to meet his. "Sir, if I have spoken wrongly, you may punish me. But I beg you, please be careful. Not every smile is filled with love." Obinna felt his chest tighten. Those words cut deep. He dismissed Amara gently, telling her to rest. Alone again in the study, he could not shake her warning. He stared at the untouched bowl of soup still sitting on the tray. Slowly, he covered it again, calling one of his trusted guards to remove it quietly. That night he could not sleep. He lay in his large bed, staring at the ceiling while Adiz slept peacefully beside him. He wondered if the woman who shared his pillow could truly be hiding such a dark secret. Doubt pressed on his heart like a heavy stone. Morning came, but peace did not. The chief's mind was restless. He dressed in silence and avoided his wife's gaze. When Adiz placed her hand on his arm and asked softly, "My husband, are you well?" he forced a smile and nodded. But inside, questions screamed louder than ever. Was Amara telling the truth? Was Adiz trying to harm him? Or was it all a terrible misunderstanding? Chief Obinna knew he could not ignore it. He had to find out the truth, no matter how painful it would be. The morning sun rose gently over the city, but inside Chief Obinna's heart, there was no peace. He dressed carefully in his fine agbada, but his mind was heavy. Adiz moved around the room with her usual grace, asking if he wanted yam porridge for breakfast. He nodded with a faint smile, but in truth, his decision had already been made. Chief Obinna could not eat anything until he knew the truth. He remembered Amara's tears, her trembling voice, and the strange uneasiness that had been haunting him for months. That day he decided he would test the food. If there was poison, then his life had been in danger all along. If there was not, then perhaps Amara had misunderstood. Either way, he needed answers. So, when Adiz placed a steaming plate of food before him, he acted calmly. He lifted his spoon, pretended to taste, and then set it down with a smile. "Thank you, my wife," he said softly. "It is delicious as always." Adiz's eyes sparkled with pride as she nodded. She kissed his cheek and left the room, thinking her husband had eaten well. The moment she was gone, Chief Obinna called one of his most trusted guards. "Take this food quietly to Dr. Chaik," he ordered in a low voice. "No one must know. Not even Madam. Tell him to test it carefully and bring the results back to me alone." The guard obeyed at once, wrapping the plate carefully and leaving in silence. Obinna sat back, his heart pounding. Every minute felt like an hour. He tried to focus on his business documents, but the words blurred before his eyes. All he could think of was that plate of food now being tested. Dr. Chaik was not just any man. He was a longtime friend of the chief. They had grown up together, studied together, and now trusted each other like brothers. Obinna knew Chaik would not lie to him. That was why he had chosen him for this secret test. Hours later, when the guard returned with a sealed envelope, Obinna's hands trembled slightly as he took it. He dismissed the guard, locked his study door, and opened the paper. His eyes scanned the words quickly and his chest grew tight. The result was clear. The food contained poison. For a long moment, Obinna sat frozen, the paper shaking in his hands. His heart sank lower than ever before. His suspicions were no longer whispers of doubt. They were the painful truth. His own wife, the woman he had trusted, the woman he had loved, had been planning his death. He dropped the paper on the table and pressed his hands against his face. His mind spun with questions. Why would she do this? Was it for money? Was there another man? Was his love not enough? Betrayal burned in his chest like fire. He had built his life with Adiz beside him. He had given her everything, luxury, wealth, respect. And now she wanted to bury him with a smile on her lips. Obinna rose from his chair and paced the room. His heavy steps echoed against the marble floor. For a moment, he thought of storming into her room and confronting her. He imagined throwing the report in her face and shouting, "Why? Why would you do this to me?" But then he stopped himself. Anger would not save him. Foolish actions could even destroy him. Adiz was clever, and if she realized he knew, she might escape or even strike faster. No, Obinna told himself he had to be wise. He had to stay calm and wait for the right moment. That night, Obinna lay beside his wife as usual, but he did not close his eyes. He listened to the gentle sound of her breathing, wondering how such a peaceful sound could come from a heart filled with betrayal. She reached out to touch his chest and whispered, "You seem quiet, my husband. Is everything well?" "Yes," he said smoothly, forcing his voice to remain steady. "I am only tired from work." She smiled, believing him, and soon drifted into sleep. But Obinna lay awake, staring at the ceiling, his mind sharp and restless. He thought of Amara. Without her warning, he would be lying in a coffin by now, not in his bed. A poor maid with nothing to her name had saved the life of a billionaire. He whispered softly into the darkness, "Thank you, Amara." The hours dragged on and Obinna made his plan. He would not act rashly. He would watch Adiz closely, gather proof, and wait for the right time to strike. A man of his power could not afford to make mistakes. Betrayal was painful, but survival was more important. The next morning, Adiz greeted him with her usual warmth. She laughed lightly as she served him tea, speaking of parties and guests. Obinna smiled, nodding as though nothing was wrong. Inside, however, his heart was heavy with knowledge. He looked at her carefully, memorizing her every gesture, her every word. Every sip of tea she offered, every plate she placed before him, reminded him of the truth hidden beneath her smile. But he stayed calm, his face unreadable. He had to be patient. He had to be wise. That evening when Adiz left for a visit to a friend, Obinna called Amara again. She entered nervously, unsure if she was safe. Obinna stood before her, his eyes steady. "You saved my life," he said quietly. Amara's eyes widened. "Sir?" Obinna showed her the report from Dr. Chaik. Her hands covered her mouth as tears filled her eyes again. She fell to her knees. "Oh, thank God," she whispered. "I was so afraid you would not believe me." Obinna gently raised her to her feet. "You were brave. Brave enough to speak when others would remain silent. I owe you my life." But his heart was still heavy. For even though he now knew the truth, the hardest part was still to come. How could he live under the same roof with a woman who wanted him dead? How could he pretend to love her, to trust her, when poison was hiding in her smile? That night, Chief Obinna sat in his study until dawn, staring at the shadows on the wall. The truth was clear, the danger was real, but the battle was not yet over. And so he waited, calm on the outside but burning inside, for the right moment to act. The evening was quiet, the kind of evening that made the walls of Chief Obinna's mansion seem taller and heavier than usual. The dining hall glowed softly with golden lights from the chandeliers, and the long table was set neatly with shining cutlery and fine plates. Servants moved about silently, arranging dishes and pouring water, preparing for dinner as they always did. But tonight, Chief Obinna's heart was different. He sat at the head of the table, his face calm but his eyes were sharp and watchful. He had been waiting for this moment. Days of silence, of pretending, of carrying the truth like a hidden knife inside his chest, had all led to this night. He had chosen not to shout, not to scream, but to confront the woman who shared his roof and his bed. The doors of the dining hall opened slowly and Adiz entered. She was dressed in a beautiful wrapper with beads on her neck, her face glowing with charm. She carried a tray with steaming food and walked gracefully to place it before him. "My husband," she said sweetly, "I made this specially for you. Eat and let your strength remain." Obinna stared at her for a long moment before smiling faintly. He pushed the plate slightly toward the middle of the table and leaned back in his chair. His voice was calm but carried an unusual weight. "My dear wife," he said, "tonight I want you to share this meal with me. Sit beside me and let us eat together." Adiz's hand froze for a second, but then she forced a small laugh. "Ah, my husband, I am not hungry," she replied quickly. "This food is for you alone. I will eat later." Obinna's eyes did not move away from her face. He tapped the table gently, and the servants paused in silence. "Strange," he said slowly, his voice steady. "You cook with so much care, yet you never taste with me. Why is that, Adiz?" Her smile faded slightly and she turned her eyes away. The room grew heavy. The servants exchanged quiet glances, sensing something unusual. Amara stood quietly at the corner, her hands clasped in front of her, her breath trembling. She had prayed for this day, but now that it had come, her heart raced. Adiz cleared her throat and said, "Obinna, why do you question me? Have I not cared for you all these years? Must I prove my love by sharing every plate?" Chief Obinna rose slowly from his chair, his tall figure casting a shadow across the room. He held a folded paper in his hand. "No, Adiz," he said firmly. "You do not need to prove with words. The proof is already here." He unfolded the paper and placed it on the table. The servants leaned forward curiously, and Adiz's eyes widened when she saw it. It was the test result from Dr. Chaik, the one that revealed the poison in the food she had served. Her face lost its color, and for the first time, fear broke through her mask of confidence. What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. Obinna's voice grew stronger. "It is the truth you tried to hide. I trusted you, Adiz. I gave you my home, my wealth, my heart. And yet, you put death in my plate." The servants gasped loudly, their eyes darting between the chief and his wife. Amara's hands pressed tightly together as tears filled her eyes. She wanted to look away but she could not. This was the moment when truth stood tall and lies fell apart. Adiz stepped back, her breath coming fast. "Obinna, no. I can explain." "Explain what?" Obinna thundered, his voice echoing through the hall. "Explain how the soup was poisoned? Explain why a poor maid had to warn me before my own wife killed me?" Adiz's lips trembled. She looked at the servants, at Amara, then back at her husband. Her pride fought with her fear, but the truth was written all over her pale face. "It was not me," she whispered weakly. "It was a mistake. Someone else." But Obinna raised his hand sharply. "Enough. Do not insult my mind. The evidence is clear. And your refusal tonight to share this food is the final proof I need." The hall was silent, except for the faint crackle of the candles. Adi's eyes darted around the room as though searching for a way out, but the walls stood tall, and every servant's gaze was fixed upon her. Amara's quiet figure in the corner seemed like a shadow of truth that Adi's could not escape. Obina's voice grew softer, but it cut deeper than before. Adis, I loved you. I stood by you when others doubted you. I raised you high as the wife of a great man. Yet you wanted me gone, buried, forgotten so you could have what? My wealth? My name? Tell me, Adis, what was my crime? For a moment, Adis opened her mouth, but no words came. Her knees shook and she lowered herself slowly into a chair, hiding her face in her hands. The mask she had worn for years was broken. The servants whispered among themselves. Some shook their heads in pity, others in anger. Amara stood still, silent, but her heart prayed for strength for her master. She had known this truth, but now it was clear for everyone to see. Obina looked around the hall, his chest heavy with sorrow. Let it be known, he said firmly, his voice carrying the weight of judgment, that betrayal cuts deeper than a knife. The woman I trusted most was the one who sought my end. But truth has spoken tonight. Adis wept quietly, but Obina's eyes no longer softened. His heart was broken, but his spirit was strong. He turned to the servants. From this day I will decide what to do with this betrayal. Until then she will not serve me food again. Not one plate, not one drop. The servants bowed. Amara lowered her head, tears still glistening on her cheeks. As Chief Obina left the hall, his steps were heavy but there was strength in them. The truth had been revealed. His heart ached, but he was alive because of one poor maid's courage. Behind him, Adis sat frozen, her hands covering her face as the golden lights flickered above her like a crown of shame. The dawn of a new day broke over Chief Obina's mansion, but this dawn was different. The air was lighter, as though the heavy shadow of betrayal had finally lifted. The night before, the truth had shattered the silence of the house, and now the household woke to a new reality. Adis, once the proud wife of the billionaire, was gone. She had been sent away in disgrace, her beauty and charm no longer able to hide the darkness of her heart. The servants whispered quietly as they went about their chores. Some shook their heads in pity for Adis, while others nodded in agreement that justice had been done. For years they had suspected something was wrong, but none of them had dared to speak. Only one person had found the courage to break the silence. Amara, the poor maid. Chief Obina sat in his study, staring at the tall shelves of books, his mind filled with deep thoughts. He had lost a wife, but in truth he had lost someone who was never really his. What hurt him most was not the absence of Adis, but the thought that she had shared his life while secretly plotting his death. His chest felt heavy, but his heart also carried a strange sense of peace. The poison that nearly killed him had been stopped by a single voice of honesty. That afternoon he sent for Amara. The young maid entered the study slowly, her head lowered as always. She wore her simple clothes, her hands folded before her. She was afraid that perhaps speaking up would now bring her punishment, or that Chief Obina might send her away for interfering. But her heart was calm because she knew she had done the right thing. Amara, Chief Obina said softly, his voice breaking the silence of the room. She knelt down quickly, greeting him with respect. He looked at her for a long time, seeing not just a maid but the bravery that had saved his life. Stand, my child, he said gently. You do not need to bow before me today. For it is I who should bow to you. You carried the courage of 1,000 hearts in your small voice. If not for you, I would be buried by now, betrayed by the woman I once called wife. Amara's eyes filled with tears. I only did what was right, sir, she whispered. I could not watch you suffer. Obina stood and walked closer. His eyes softened, and for the first time in days, a true smile touched his lips. You say it so simply, but do you know how many in this house saw what you saw and kept silent? Do you know how many chose fear over truth? Yet you, a poor maid with nothing, risked your life to save mine. That is a gift I can never repay. Amara tried to speak, but her voice trembled. She had never been praised before in her life. She was used to being overlooked, treated as invisible. To hear such words from the master of the house felt like a dream she could not touch. But Chief Obina meant every word. That day he called the elders of the family and gathered the servants. In front of them all, he stood beside Amara and said, This young woman saved me when no one else would. From this day she is no longer a maid in this house. She is my daughter in honor, and I will see that her life changes for the better. The servants gasped, clapping softly in awe. Some could not believe what they had heard. Amara covered her face with her hands as tears poured down her cheeks. True to his word, Chief Obina began a new chapter for her. He enrolled Amara in school, paying her fees and giving her the chance to learn and grow. The girl who had once scrubbed floors and carried water now sat in classrooms, holding books with trembling hands, her heart filled with hope. It was not easy at first. She was older than some of the other students and many mocked her. But Amara remembered the strength it took to speak the truth to Chief Obinna, and she reminded herself that she could endure anything. Slowly her hard work shone. Teachers praised her for her effort, and fellow students began to respect her. Back at the mansion, Obinna found peace again. Without Adi's shadow, the house became warmer, filled with laughter once more. He often watched Amara studying in the evenings and felt pride swell in his chest. She was proof that loyalty, honesty and courage were worth more than wealth or beauty. Years passed, and Amara blossomed into a confident young woman. She never forgot the days when she was mocked as a poor maid, nor did she forget the night when her trembling voice saved a life. She carried those memories like a lamp, lighting her steps into the future. Chief Obinna, too, carried his own lesson. He had learned that trust is not built by riches, nor by sweet words, but by the sincerity of the heart. He never forgot Adi's betrayal, but he also never let it destroy him. Instead, he allowed the experience to guide him toward those who were true. In the village, people began to whisper about Amara's story. They called her the girl who saved the chief, and mothers told their daughters about her bravery. She became a symbol of hope to many, showing that even the poorest voice could carry the strongest truth. And when young women asked her how she found the courage to speak, she always smiled and said, "Do not fear when it is time to speak the truth. A heart that is honest will always shine, even in the darkest night." The mansion stood taller than ever, but it was not the gold or the riches inside it that gave it strength. It was the story of a poor maid who rose above fear, who chose honesty over silence, and who proved that true loyalty is not bought, it is born from love and sincerity. Amara's life had changed forever, and Chief Obinna's heart had healed. Together they showed the world that betrayal may break a house, but truth can rebuild it stronger than before. And so, the story ended not with shame but with hope, a poor maid standing tall, a chief grateful for life, and a lesson that would never be forgotten.